today's guest, we have ultra runner, coach and physio, Tarrin van Niekerk, also known as the Trail Physio. She's an ultimate direction and ultra runner. She's a role model in the sport and also as a friend to me. Tarrin, it's really good to have you on the podcast as one of our first guests. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Em. I am so excited to be here, and I'm so excited that you're finally doing this podcast. I think trail culture is going to be great. But about myself, I'm an ultra runner. I love running, and I sometimes race.
Nice.
But I see myself more as a mountain addict. I really love exploring, and to me, trail running and ultra running is all about exploring new routes, races, but also exploring your limits and seeing where it can take you.
Amazing.
Yes.
Tarrin, when you moved to Stellenbosch recently, recently is a relative word.
18 months ago.
18 months ago,
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
And so I can imagine initially you were just, every trail was new and exploring this area was just awesome. How much time did you kind of spend in this area before you moved here?
We had a house here previously. So, my mom had a house.
Nice.
So I would come for holidays and training camps, and that's kind of where I fell in love with it. I had basically tagged a lot of the peaks even before I moved here.
So cool.
But there was a lot of trails that I didn't know, and I only really discovered the awesome extensive trail network once I moved here. And
Nice.
I am just in love with this place.
I can imagine.
Yes, and it's safe. I
Yes.
mean, I do a lot of training on my own, solo. So to be able to run somewhere where I don't have to worry about my safety is a big thing for me as a woman.
Tarrin, trying to decide what to talk to you about was actually one of the most difficult things, just because you have, I think, women of many talents. There's a lot going on, so we're going to see what we can get to today. But first things first. I mean, yeah, training wise, and kind of your calendar the last couple of months. You've had an incredible last few months. I think I want to dial it all the way back to UTCT last year, where you ran the 100K and you were the seventh seventh overall.
Seventh goal, yeah.
Seventh lady, yeah. And first in SA in a super stacked elite field, which, yeah, I mean, I think the whole world was watching UTCT last year, and you performed you had a great run under, I think, what would have been kind of classified as a lot of pressure. And then you kicked off 2023 with wins at not only pass to pass, but bat run as well, all in a lead up to racing and winning George Might 100K by UTMB, which meant that you qualify for UTMB next year.
Yes, that is so exciting.
That is so exciting. We are definitely gonna get to that a little bit later. But with all of this in mind, I mean, you've had a great couple of months. There's a lot going on. What has the lead up looked like for you, and how would you say kind of your training has changed, or have you changed anything in the last year or so, or was this always the plan?
No, I think coming off last year, I was very intentional about changing a few things. And we sat down at the beginning of the year. I don't know if you remember, with all the Bergskap coaches. And I think Gabriel was very intentional about a few things, and I brought some things to the table, and then we worked out a plan for the year. One big thing that changed this year is that we brought in a lot more specificity in my training.
Awesome.
So I wanted to focus a little bit more on learning how to race harder on shorter distances.
Yes.
And then Gabriel said, okay, well, let's couple that with some VO2 max training and lactate threshold.
Yes.
And so we dialed back the volume, and we really ramped up a lot more quality sessions, which was quite out of my comfort zone. I mean, you can put me on a trail and ask me to run all day. I can run for days, but give me a 3-minute full out hill.
Yeah,
and I feel I'm going to die.
Yeah.
It's a sufferfest.
And I mean, those sessions are sometimes, when I can imagine when you look at them or see them for the first time, it feels like a bit of a beast, It's like uncharted territory. What am I doing?
And I think you have, with this ultra mindset, you have a preservation mindset almost. Like, okay, I shouldn't push that hard because the hill is still that long.
Yes.
But what you're asking from these hard sessions is to actually go to the max and like push until you tank, basically, because otherwise it's not going to work. So, but I actually, in the end, I really enjoyed that. And that allowed me to race shorter distances at Pass to Pass and Bat Run. I've always wanted to do Bat Run.
Awesome.
And that was an incredible race where I was basically just able to go like full out up and down mountains 3 times.
All at night in Cape Town. And if I remember correctly, I think we had an insane amount of rainfall not only so on the day, but leading up to the race.
It was so wet. I mean, the rocks were so slippery. I think I did some sketchy stuff, but I didn't break anything and I made it. And those are still my favorite kinds of races. So I think the specificity in training really made a big difference to my performance and my fitness overall. And then another thing that I really wanted to focus on this year was refining my race day nutrition plan.
Nice.
I had a really bad time at UTCT last year. I couldn't get any calories in for the last 30 Ks. I eventually threw up outside the UCT aid station.
Oh man!
But then it was too late, and I was just running on fumes for the last 30 Ks.
Yeah, but that stretch. I mean, that even just from UCT to the end, that blockhouse climb. I mean, it's demanding. It's not like a cruisy run home.
Yes, so I was literally just one foot in front of the other, and I'm like, I'm not quitting. Like This was a crap time, but I'm not quitting. So I knew that I had to do a lot more work in terms of race day nutrition. Okay. So when you race at a high intensity, I think your gut does funny things. And if you get it wrong, then it goes seriously wrong. So this year, I think you gave me like brilliant advice at the beginning of the year. And now I eat before every run.
Nice.
And I really feel my long runs better. I remember you saying, Tarrin, you know how you're going to know that you fueled the long run correctly? Is you should not feel like you want to smash a burger at the end of the run. And now I go on my long run and I eat and I eat and I eat. And by the end of the run, I'm like, oh, I'm not hungry. I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. Yes. Em will be so proud of myself.
That is so epic.
And that really paid off when I went to George. I was able to get calories in continuously throughout the race. And I think I've really seen the benefit of your gut adapting to that high intensity training as well.
And kind of on the gut adaptation, I mean, I think sometimes we expect, I'm gonna go out for one run, or I'm gonna try this on 1 or 2 training sessions, and you kind of just expect it to work. Whereas when you view your actual run training, I think you don't expect that. You're like, cool, I'm gonna put in, like a 6-week block, and then hopefully I'm gonna see some marginal improvements. And I mean, in terms of nutrition, would you agree that it's kind of something you need to try and test and just keep on tweaking right up until race day, instead of just expecting like a magical, cool, this is just going to work for me?
Yeah, definitely. And don't expect that. It's funny how things change, because sometimes the plan works really well, and then 6 months later or a year later, that plan doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
And then you need to like keep refining it, or you need to throw it all out and start all over again. I think it's important to be very specific with your nutrition training during the last few blocks before a race.
Okay. And then also just kind of, I think, I can't remember who said it, but it's like a plan is only as good as its adaptability.
Exactly.
It's like, if you all of a sudden, as you said, something doesn't work for you, you've tried and tested it, and then the next thing you start a training block. And I mean, even going into something like the lactate sessions, the harder training blocks for you, I can think that what you eat just before you do like a really easy aerobic effort isn't necessarily going to be the right sort of fuel for something more anaerobic, and when you're putting yourself in the hurt box.
Exactly. I think then you're going to want to have something that goes in fast and tastes really neutral. That's the way for me.
Yeah.
I like neutral tasting things.
And I think it was actually a couple of months ago now, but it was not so long ago that a group of Bergskap athletes went to George to check out the Six Peaks route, which is absolutely amazing. That's Jacques Mouton, who is also very involved in MUT, and he's, I think, the route director at MUT. And we went to go and anyway do a little lap around George, and Tarrin and I shared a room in that training house, and as one does, you get close and you talk about all sorts of things, one of them being pre-race food and like what can you get down at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, especially when races start at kind of really unreasonable hours. And I'm someone who struggles to kind of actually get breakfast in even on a normal day. And then Tarrin said to me like, well, you kind of paid back the good advice and you were like, just eat something that's like you really want to eat. And she proceeded to unpack the nicest looking banana bread and nut butter that I've ever seen. And I was like, wow. And like even at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m, I was like, I could like get a piece of banana bread down. And I actually, I don't even know if I told you, I went on to use that at George Mutt. I woke up and
fantastic banana bread.
Yeah, or like for every long run from Six Peaks onwards. So don't do what I did. On the day of that run, I tried something new. Would not recommend that. Luckily, it all worked out. But since then, that's kind of been my go-to. I moved away from trying to get down a bowl of rice to being like, cool, I'm going to eat like half a loaf of banana bread, put some nut butter on that.
Lovely.
So good. And black coffee.
Little slices of banana on top of the banana bread.
Oh, so good.
Honey.
Like literally, like even now I'm like oh, I'm kind of hungry like thinking about this. But yeah, so something like that. Yeah, I think for athletes just to be open to trying and testing things, and even if it's scary, I think what we discussed just before Six Peaks was like we're here to try this, and I think we even tested nutrition on the route that day, and we were like, the point of this is if it doesn't work, then we know, and you check that box and you move on, which
exactly. It's
difficult, but it's better than on race day being like, okay, now I'm going to try and check this box on top of everything else that you're worrying about. So nutrition kind of in training, Tarrin, we kind of touched on that, but out of training, and this is going to link into kind of getting into recovery and chatting about that. But is there anything, would you say, that you changed outside of your training in the last couple of months? You mentioned that you adjusted your load. Was there any changes, or did you stick to kind of same with
regards
diet?
To my nutrition?
Yeah, outside of your training, like fueling.
Not really. I think I've always been really good at eating healthy.
Nice.
And making sure, like I view food in 3 different categories. I view it as fuel, what I need to put into my body to fuel the work I do. And then I look at food as what do I need to eat on a daily basis to make sure that I recover from the work I've done, that my body repairs itself, and that I'm also getting the right nutrients to keep me healthy. And to me, that's always just been a lot of vegetables, I don't know, lean meats, protein shakes, eggs, dairy. I basically eat everything, but mostly a lot of vegetables and fruit.
Nice.
I don't believe diets should have names. I just believe you need to find what works for you and go with that. But make sure you get all the building blocks in, because that's so important for recovery. Underfueling is one of the biggest reasons for people getting sick and injured. Yeah. And I don't want to. I'm a fan of consistency. Yeah. I don't want to lose training days because I'm sick or injured. Yeah. Or training months because I've got bone stress injuries.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of, I think nutrition and food, especially in this sport where whether we wanted to or not, weight plays a role. And I think it's easy to make an enemy out of your nutrition, as opposed to being like, this is fuel, this is nourishing, this speaks to kind of a lot of levels of my training and my kind of lifestyle balance as well, and making decisions that are sustainable, I think also something that's easy is like when you're motivated and training and you're in like a intense block, and you're dialed in and focused, it's like, cool, I can feel I can do this, I can stay focused. And then kind of minor setbacks, if you're like me and you eat your feelings, then it becomes difficult to stick to something sustainable. So I like how you say you broke it up into 3 kind of categories, and the goal is to be healthy and exactly. Injury free. Yeah.
Yes, I think we have to think, what do I need to put in, not just for this week or towards my race, but if I still want to run when I'm 70, what do I need to put into my body?
That's great. Yeah. The long-term view.
The long-term goal.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, nutrition, recovery, these things kind of go hand in hand. We actually had a cool kind of back and forth on our WhatsApp group the other day where we were speaking about
recovery.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, like the nuggets that you pick up. But you said you, like the last couple of months, you dialed back on your kind of training, your volume, but you the load kind of was adjusted in terms of intensity. So what is recovery like? What is good practice for you, Tarrin, in terms of recovering? I think there's a lot out there, and I liked what you shared. So if you can remember and share with us.
I'm a big fan of. I'm a bit of a research junkie, so
Nice.
I like to read a lot on what really works. And I think there's a lot of recovery practices out there where the evidence is contradictory or not conclusive. But what really is the foundation of recovery is eating and sleeping well. And those are also like the low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
I mean, they are cheap and easy to get by, and you got to do them every day. So optimize that first.
Great.
And then together with that is managing your stress, because don't we say training stress and life stress, it's still stress is stress and stress. And now with everyone like measuring HRV, they also see the impact of not just running stress, but life stress.
Yeah.
And so I think there are three important things: is to first sleep, eat well, so that your body can recover, and manage your stress. But then you can add the other little building blocks on top of that foundation. Yeah. So as you have more resources, whether that's financial or time resources, then you can start adding in things that you're going to need to pay for extra.
Yes. Your massages, your contrast therapies, your whatever the case is.
Exactly. You get yourself a massage gun. and I rarely do any of the other things.
Interesting.
I really don't have time in my day to focus an extra hour just on recovery practices that I believe is not necessarily gonna be that worthwhile. I would rather just bank an extra hour of sleep.
Okay.
That's my approach.
Yeah.
And
let me nail the two kind of biggest, like if we're talking about the pyramid, it's like that big base, right? Yes. That 80% of it is how much you're sleeping and what you're eating.
Exactly. Yeah. If I go through a period where I have a bit more time, definitely a massage, because it feels good. Yeah. And it's also part of de-stressing and relaxation, which is definitely good for recovery. But looking at all the fads out there, it's hard to say what really works, and I would probably not spend my money on it.
Okay.
Rather on awesome. Racing and traveling.
I love the honesty, because I mean the sport is if you start adding up like the hidden costs, I think it's kind of getting wild out there.
Exactly.
And Tarrin, your typical kind of week for you of training, like you've got, I'm sure, a routine dialed in. You work. You're a physio. You kind of are juggling a lot of balls. Just give us like an overview of, typically, do you train in the morning, at night? You said you don't necessarily have the time to fit in an extra hour of recovery. I mean, running and then being on your feet all day as a physio, it could be pretty intense. Maybe, I don't know.
I think it can, but I think you adapt to everything. And I've been a physio for many years, so I think I'm just used to being on my feet, so I'm adapted to that, but it can be quite tiring during the big weeks. And
what is a big week for you?
I think 120 Ks.
Okay.
And then you add in intensity within that 120 Ks.
Yes.
So it's not all easy running. I hardly do more than that.
Okay.
And then without routine, it's much harder to actually just keep all the balls in the air.
Yes.
So during like certain blocks of training, I am very focused on routine. I wake up early, I go to bed early, I pack my lunch and my breakfast the night before. I put out my clothes and my shoes. I pack my gym bag because I shower after, and then I go to work. So I try and follow that routine, because then I just need to execute. I'm like, okay, I want to get through this week. I don't want all the extra things around life stress to influence my running. When I run, I want to just switch off and I want to focus on my run. Yeah. I don't want to have to worry about everything else that needs to get done. And then if I follow that routine, I just execute.
Nice. That's great.
And that works out. And then in the off season, there's no routine. Then I go to bed when I want.
Which is also good.
And I drink wine.
Yeah.
And I see my
great.
friends. And then I sleep late.
Yeah.
So I think it's all in moderation. It's periods.
Yeah.
I don't live my life like that every week. But during the focus blocks closer to race, let's say 12 to 16 weeks before a race, I become a lot more focused on routine.
Yeah, you're trying to dial in and just kind of get the work done. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
No,
But morning training
amazing.
is definitely preferable.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some people do really well in afternoon training, but my legs are just so heavy.
Yes.
And then literally, like, I don't know, the willpower. I feel like for every hour after 1 p.m., my willpower to run just diminishes by 50%.
Yeah. I feel like it's also like the most amazing excuses come to mind, or specifically for me, of why I should not go, especially if it's like a scary session or a first time. I'm like, I'm not ready, or I'll see one cloud and be like, maybe it's going to rain. Like, like all those
maybe
things.
You should have banana bread first.
Yeah. Or like, as opposed to getting up in the morning and being like, well, I'm sure you feel the same. I don't think I've ever started or been on a run early morning and been like, oh man, I shouldn't have got up and done this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here we have I have so many photos on my phone because we get the most incredible sunrises.
Yes.
So when I'm up on Stellenboschberg early in the morning, and it's
great.
just quiet, and you see like the whole sky just turns like this beautiful purple and red colors.
And you see the whole kind of city waking up.
Exactly.
And you're like, wow, I'm up here. Like, this is awesome.
It's so worth it. Morning training.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Tarrin, back to kind of just looping back to this, was at the start of the year when we kind of met as a group of coaches, and we spoke about your training, and you're taking on kind of the shorter distances, which for some people, I think something like Bat Run, which is still, it's a decent amount of climbing over 30 kilometers. I think they wouldn't say it's short, but in the context of being a 100K athlete, I see what you mean. And one of the concepts that I've seen pull through on your social media, we've chatted about it a lot, even within the academy amongst the ladies, it's this idea of running brave. And I think that's something that really struck me at the start of the year. I asked you, what do you want to get out of doing these races in the lead up to Mut? And you kind of paused, and then you said you just want to be able to run brave. You want to, it's a new territory. You're trying, like, you've got nothing to lose, if you don't end up on the podium, that's not what you're there for. You're not chasing a person, you're not chasing a time. As we said, it's uncharted territory, and you're there to just run brave. I think leading up to Mut, I saw a post about that, or was it just before, I think. So talk to us just about that.
About running brave.
Running brave. I just love this concept.
Yes. So first we said, like, this year I want to be a bit more specific about training, and I'm going to train my gut and to take in more nutrition. So the third thing was definitely working on a different kind of mindset. I think female ultra runners are really good at being patient.
Yes.
We're really good at starting a race and finishing. But I don't know if we always run as hard as we can. Or that's the way I felt.
Yeah.
And so I look at the guys and I'm like, they just go. They go from the get-go. And they are so, like, bold. And, like, they have so much ego sometimes, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think we can learn a lot from that.
We sometimes need a bit more.
Yes, but the real thing that really triggered it is I was at, I coach Tarrin van Niekerk.
Yes.
And so last year I was at the UTCT finish line of the 55. It was the Friday before the 100K.
Yes.
So I was there to wait for Tarrin. And she had decided just a few weeks before that she's going to race the 55, her very first ultra.
Yeah.
And so she lined up, but she's so talented. And so I was there when Lundy and was it Kimmy came in. And those girls, they were just like, you should have seen it. I don't know if you were there, but it looks like they ran with so much fury.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but to
Yeah,
me,
there
I was just
passion.
like, it looks so brave.
Oh man,
And then
I'm getting
May
goosebumps.
came in just after them, and she had that same like expression on her face. It was just like, I'm just there and I'm giving everything.
Oh,
And I'm
man.
like, I want to race like that.
And you were inspired by
I
one
was
of your
so
athletes,
inspired
like,
by that race
awesome.
finish. All three of them just coming in and
Yeah.
just like, you could see they left it all out there. And I'm like, okay, but I'm going to need to be braver to be able to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
And so this year I worked a lot in my mindset to think, okay, well, I want to go harder, but it feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm going to need to be brave and lean into that discomfort of racing harder, to be bolder, and to also, I mean, not just physically, because it is physically hard to race at that intensity for that long, especially 100K.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a different game.
That's a very fine line between like keeping that pace and actually bonking.
Yeah. It's not a case of like, I'm just going to go out like as hard as I can and sustain it. Yeah, it's not a 10K.
But I was able to do that at Pass to Pass and Bat Run.
Awesome,
So, and then I took some of that feeling into the 100K, which was really good.
That's so cool,
Yes.
Tarrin. So you're like, as you're doing it, I think you also get a feel for like that feeling. I remember dot watching Bat Run. I think I saw you the day of Bat Run. In the post
because you borrowed me a headlamp.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I was like, cool, I'm going to be like dot watching you. And there was kind of a cat and mouse game with the kind of the first peak. Or I was just, what I thought to myself was, well, the whole time I was like, I wonder what you're thinking, because I could see like you're holding steady. You've got like the leading, because you didn't lead from the start, but you had the leading lady. She was ahead of you at a stage. I'm trying to remember the exact details. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, just keep running brave. It wasn't a case of like, don't lose your bravery. I was like, what you're doing is brave. I'd seen videos of what I thought were rivers and later found out those were the trails. And I was like, Tarrin, like when I saw you that morning, you were just ready to go for it and do just that. And it was so awesome for me to see when you came past that last checkpoint. And then I literally was like, come on, you can do this. And kind of refreshing the Instagram page and then seeing you come in was just so cool.
It was an incredible race.
Yeah.
And I had it was tough up the first climb, because I feel like I have maybe a lot of ultra runners will say that, but it takes you a long time to warm up. And it's we're not joking when we say that.
Yeah.
It feels like I can never gun from the start. So it takes me maybe an hour to warm up, and then I'm good. Then I can push.
You're in.
Then the second and the third peak feels easier than the first one. That's a funny thing about it.
Yeah, that's
and then you can actually really gun it.
But that's also, I think, are you kind of fighting with thoughts? Like, because I mean, an hour is a pretty long time to be having some self-talk. And I mean, are you feeling in that time like, oh, like this is a bit of a niggle, or that's not working, or this is uncomfortable? Do you kind of have to fight quite a lot of kind of negative self-talk that's going on?
You're wondering how close am I to that red line, because you're breathing quite hard and your legs are just aching.
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, no, just push through. You're still okay. The downhill is coming. Just push up. The downhill is coming.
That's great.
So yes, you need to continuously fight against slowing down.
Okay.
And just lean into that discomfort.
That's so cool. Leaning into it. I like that. And Tarrin, so I mean, we mentioned to May now, and earlier on when I introduced you, we said you are a coach. The trail physio who runs and is a friend and is also a coach. And chat to me a bit about coaching and how coaching and even your physio work has kind of shaped you as a runner. I mean, you just mentioned now that you were inspired by Sumay. So that day, just quickly back onto UTCT, I remember going to the start of the race and seeing her, and then kind of making small talk or just checking in. I hadn't seen her in a while. I've known her for quite a few years, and she said, oh yeah, I know, I'm gonna take it like very, very chilled because this is my first ultra. And then I remember thinking, I want to believe you, but I don't. And then getting to the first aid station and see her flying through, and being so unbelievably stoked for her and being like, dude, you're in the mix. And then seeing you out being like, my wife is racing. And I was like, this is awesome. I was supposed to be driving to a wedding in Oudtshoorn that day, which is approximately 8 hours from Cape Town, and instead of leaving straight away, we ended up watching the whole race and seeing all of this go down.
It was
so
incredible.
we literally, the group physically couldn't tear ourselves away. We were like, this is amazing. The men's field was also doing superbly, but I think I knew more of the women, and just seeing how that race was unfolding was crazy. But yeah, as kind of coaching someone like Sume or your other athletes, how is that in the mix with your own training and racing?
I am learning so much from the athletes I coach. They've taught me so much over the years. And it's not just the elites, it's also the everyday people, the people just getting into trail running, to just the way they find the joy.
Yeah.
And the way they are inspired to run trail. And then, it makes me so happy. And I think one of the biggest things also is they've taught me to be kinder to myself.
Wow.
Because you're continuously giving feedback to people on their training. And as a coach, I really believe in really constructive, positive feedback. I don't like to criticize, but I like to foster a growth mindset.
Yeah.
So if you have a runner who's self-critical or low confidence, and you kind of get them to work through that, and you see the way they change, and then you catch yourself being self-critical on a workout or a run or a race, and then you're like, oh, I got to practice what I preach.
Yeah.
And then you kind of learn from
good.
them, and it's like, well, if I am giving them this advice, why I'm not taking that myself?
Yeah.
And so that's changed a lot for me in being more accepting of my own running. And I think on technical aspects, they come up with the most interesting questions. I mean, you must get this too. And some of it is so complicated. And then I look at it and I'm like, this is a really good question, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
But you know what? Let me get back to you. So then
that's great. Just
then
that
I
learner mindset.
disappear down this research rabbit hole. And
calling
then,
in every
Exactly.
favor of every researcher that you know.
And then I emerge like 2 or 3 days later and I'm like, ta-da!
This is what I found.
We've got an answer. And then, I mean, I learned so much from the process as well.
Yeah.
And I think then you get to apply that to your own running. So I think it ties really well together. The same with like the physio background, learning to be patient with injuries.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, well, this is advice that I'm giving my patients. Maybe I should take that too. That
was literally one of my questions that I'd lined up was, your knowledge as a physio. I mean, I can imagine that most of the time it helps. It's so interlinked, but are there moments where it hinders you, and do you take your own advice? I think I'm saying this as somebody that has recently had a kind of taste of the injury medicine, and being like, this is why coaches need coaches as well, like pressing it, leaning into my coach and being like, listen, this is where I'm at. And he's like, but you give, like, just take the advice that you give. And I was like, I'm struggling right now. So yeah, how do you find that? It's very different when you're on the other side. Yeah. And you just want to be a naggy runner who doesn't want to take time off. So I think being a physio, I kind of know when I can run through something and when I should stop, when I should take a day off. So I think I don't stress about injuries maybe like other people do, because I can immediately, and if I don't assess, I'm like, I go to my partner, Christoph, and I'm like, okay, just take a look. Yes. Can I run? Can I not run? Yes. So if I need that objective answer, then I'll go and get an opinion. Okay. But I think most of the time I'm like, so it's a little niggle. Let's just give it a day or two. It will be fine. In most of the cases, it is fine. Yeah, and I think that's something so worthwhile in terms of taking a day off. I think to say day off or race day to some runners, they're like, ooh, no, don't, that's like, I can't take a day off. I'm training for a 100-miler, or I can't take a day off. I've got this or that. And it's like, rather take that day as opposed to being out for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Exactly. I always tell them, listen to the whispers before they become screams. That is so good. And I'm like listening to this in the context of being injured, and I'm like, man, I should have listened to the whispers. Exactly. No, that's really cool. And in terms of like trends that you see, Tarrin, coming through, I mean, do you treat a lot of trail runners? Is there something that, or like, let me start with the end. Where I'm going with this is, what advice would you give to kind of people getting into the sport and who are enthusiastic trail runners? We're going to talk some more just now about how the sport is growing, but is there kind of trends that you're seeing as a physio and a coach, and as an athlete? I mean, you've got kind of a little bit of each world feeding into what you know, and yeah, are you seeing stuff that you're like, man, if I could give some advice, this is what it would be?
A lot of philosophical advice, yes. But you're talking about injuries, eh?
Yeah, specifically injuries.
I think the biggest thing people should remember is that you cannot prevent running injuries. We all get them.
Yeah.
What we take into account is that the biggest reason for running injuries is a change in training load. You suddenly add speed work, or you do more volume, or you ramp up training too quickly, and then you get injured.
Yeah.
That's maybe the biggest reason. But the opposite side is you can't get better if you don't ramp up training. Yeah. So there's always going to be that risk of injury.
Yeah.
But you can manage it by just really listening to your body, maybe getting a coach and making sure you don't do too much too fast.
Yeah.
So I think that in terms of managing injury risk around running injuries, together maybe with your mobility work, your strength training, and really optimal recovery strategies.
Yes, so hanging fruit.
Yes, and those are mostly for the overuse injuries that we see in trail runners. But I think something that else with regards that really comes out of trail running that we don't see in road running is trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just part of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, we all fall, we all roll. I mean, I think I roll the ankle once a month.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I see a lot more than I see in road runners.
Okay.
Is coming out of trail is physical, like falls and trauma.
Actual like impact injuries. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you're running brave in training.
Exactly. It's going to happen.
Yeah. And when I think of some of the routes, I mean, actually Tarrin was doing a loop where we're sitting currently is Jonkershoek Stellenbosch, and not so long ago, I think 2 weeks ago, Tarrin was busy checking out Jonkershoek from all angles and did the Hoefijster or the horseshoe, which is a super famous route. And when I think of that trail and the trauma, I'm like, I think there's a couple of sketchy sections there.
Oh my word. I mean, that route is basically, it's scrambling. It's like hands on rock. Like you've got your hands on rocks all day. There's a lot of climbing. There's a lot of narrow ledges.
Yeah.
It's not something you should do if you battle with heights.
Do you battle with heights? No, that's
luckily
great.
Not.
I was like, I have this thing. I'm like, I know a lot of trail runners who do, but I'm like, which is interesting. I'm like overcoming the fear every time they go out. That's awesome, but that's good.
I sometimes have, because I moved down from Gauteng, I still have a lot of friends who live up there, and they come down from holidays, and then my favorite thing to do is to take them up Stellenboschberg.
Oh,
but
great.
We go up Paradise Cliffside.
Yes.
And then you traverse over back into town, into Kutsenburg. And there's some scramble sections up there.
Yes.
And then I sometimes forget, because we do these things all the time, and I forget, I'm like, now I need to just screen people and say, do you have a problem with heights? Because I'm like, at some stage I'm going to take someone halfway up, and they're going to be, oh no, I'm not going further.
I can't do this.
Yes.
And then
but it's such
frozen.
a beautiful route. Yeah.
But yeah, I think my family WhatsApp groups, classic. What's everybody up to on the weekend? And I think I've reached a point a couple of times where I'm like, I think I'm not going to send that photo on the group because my mom might have something to say about it. It's like
There's a lot I don't show my mom.
I think I saw some of the stories from Karu that she shared, and I was like, whoa, guys, like that drop off is right there. Beautiful, worthwhile. And I think, I mean, you guys are experienced kind of mountain athletes, so that was cool. But that route, not for the faint of heart. But I'm like rabbit trailing and getting excited about the Hoefijster, but really good advice, Tarrin, that everybody gets injuries. I think that's like a good thing to remember. I think when you're on a roll with training for something, you're dialed in, you're doing the stuff, you're recovering, even if you're in theory ticking all the boxes, you know, an injury can still come from somewhere, because just load or stress placed on the body, weeks and months kind of compounds, and one day you might just, it's all of a sudden an overuse injury, you know.
Yes,
or
you can do everything
impact.
right.
Yeah.
And it will still happen.
And I think just making peace with that
is
make good.
Peace with that.
Yeah, and being like, you won't always have a low, like just like the summits. It's like you've had these high points and it's epic, and then you have moments where you're like, man, this sucks.
And it makes you appreciate running so much more if you come back from that.
It does. Yeah. Flip, I could like go on all day about this, but I think kind of transitioning, can you believe, close to the end. This sport is super fast growing. I think we, just before the podcast started, we had like a brief back and forth about this, and from where it was 10 years ago to where it is now. And I think people who've been in it for even longer than that will be like, oh, you should have seen it 15 or 20 years ago. And I mean, yeah, it's growing, and starting anything I think can be scary, intimidating. We know this. We've all tried something new before, but what advice would you give to somebody getting into this, Tarrin? I mean, let's start. How long have you been doing this? And then if you can think back, like what advice would you give?
I think I ran my first trail like maybe 12, 13 years ago. It's been a while. Yeah. But I only ran my first Altra in 2016.
Okay.
So not that long ago. I think there's a few things that I think I'd like to tell new trail runners. I think the first thing is make sure you know your why.
Yeah.
Because that's going to give you direction. And it's going to also make sure that you run for yourself and not compare yourself to other people. And when you 80 Ks in and you are throwing up and you're cramping and you have raining. And it's raining and you have another 20 Ks and a big mountain to climb, your why is going to need to be really strong.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So I think that's important. And I think I'd like to also tell people to dare to dream. And set the big goals.
Yeah.
But then also don't be so focused on finish lines that you miss out on the journey, because that's the best part.
Yeah.
It's just that growth process of just stretching your limits day by day.
That's so cool. And I think it's good to look back. I mean, if you had to kind of go back in time and talk to yourself 10, 12 years ago and say, listen, this is where you are now, I think that version of you would be like, what?
Exactly.
Yeah, really? Is that possible? Yeah.
It happens so gradually that you don't see it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then, your why will change as well.
Yeah.
It will change every season, every year. But also always remember why you're running.
So cool. Yeah, I think that's in light of everything, looking back now, talking about like how to race, how to run brave, how to manage your recovery, your nutrition, when injuries come along, when disappointments come along, that why is super important. And if you're only racing for one thing or running for one thing, when it's taken away, it's devastating. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool. Good.
Why do you run?
Why do I run? Man, I love being outside. Like, I think just the privilege of being able to move like we do and get to the places we go to, and that's the other thing that drives me, is like seeing a new place, and that feeling of seeing a new place for the first time that's so remote and so high up.
It's incredible.
And being like, not everybody can or will do this with their lives. It's like, not everyone has to love running, I get that, but there's just such a privilege in that for me, where I'm like, I get to see this. I don't have to.
Makes you
but
so
I get
grateful. It's you're strong enough to do that.
Yeah, and like what our bodies can do. And I think coming from a background, I mean, I joke, like I was allergic to running at school. I was a water through and through. Swimming, really? The only time I ever ran was after a hockey ball. and yeah, like now again, like if I had to jump back 10 years ago and tell myself, this is the game you'd be in, you'd be chatting to runners, friends with them, you'd be a runner, I think, high school me would be like, no ways. It's just not possible.
Not possible.
So that why has definitely changed. I think when I got into it, maybe we've all been through seasons, I think, where you run through it for the wrong reasons, or you get sucked into a performance mentality, whether it's versus yourself or versus like kind of against somebody else. But yeah, this year's been good headspace. And I think having kind of like-minded people like you and the Baskop community, where you're on a journey with people who think like you, you know, and
Yes,
just
that
slight
makes a
difference
difference.
of opinion, but that why, you know, and that the important foundational things. It's like, cool. I'm on the same page as this group of people. We're all pushing each other to be better, and better isn't necessarily faster or winning, but it's taking time to appreciate the fact that we can do this, supporting one another through the lows. That's the why. Yeah.
And growing.
Yeah, and growing. I mean, like, you never get there. You never reach it. Just as you said, the journey
No.
evolves. And like, if you chat to anyone who's run like one ultra or one anything that like you finish, and if you know, if you're cramping or whatever, as soon as that goes away, it's already like, what's next? Or like the goals keep getting bigger, or not necessarily bigger in terms of distance, but like, you know, I'm going to try and run in this environment, or I'm going to go to this country, or I'm going to try and do it with this group of people, and it's just so cool how it's
And what you
constantly
thought
evolving.
wasn't possible a year ago is now possible.
Becomes possible. Oh man, and that's like the great thing with coaching as well. Like when you celebrate, you look back with your athletes and you're like, hey, remember when this session was like really scary and hard, and now you're like
Doing it for breakfast.
yeah, and this is thrown into like the mix of like a bunch of other new things in like a really big week that you're having, and look at you conquering all of this, you know.
The joy from seeing that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I love that.
Oh man. Great advice, Tarrin. Really, really cool. It's been so nice having you on here. I mean, I think we're gonna have to get you back, and I think I could just chat to you all day about all sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, the podcast is relatively new, and the name Trail Culture is kind of, yeah, it's just about there's something to celebrate. You know, we spoke about our why, and there's this culture. All over the world, I think it looks different in South Africa than it does to maybe other places. But what does trail culture mean to you?
I think the first word that I think about is community.
Great.
And it's a beautiful thing how trail running brings people together.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, basically. And then it's not just like-minded people coming together and having a shared love for trails and nature and being outside and running. It's also how those people support each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I have been so incredibly grateful to friends who second me at races, the people who check in when you're not doing okay, and the people who would be your best cheerleaders. And I get to do that for other people as well.
Yeah.
And to me, that is trail culture, is being part of that community where you contribute, but where you would also get something out of it if you're struggling.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've been fortunate enough to be part of many communities.
Yeah, you found
and
that.
And they keep growing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, when I think of you, I'm like, there's pockets. It's like you've got kind of training friends, the Baskop community, obviously coaches. I mean, you've got your own athletes and then communities like Steady Shakeout, which is a local run crew that meets here. Yeah, there's just like bunches of people, and even at the races and the events that you take part in, you know, I'm sure you've met some incredible people along the way, and you're kind of like, just as you think, I don't think I can meet more cool people, like you get to a race and you're like, oh, there it is, there's some more of them.
And the funny thing is, it's not just the runners, it's sometimes their siblings or their parents or their spouses, and then you become friends with them, and they kind of become friends with each other, and they rock up at races, and they've got their own community on the side, the supporters community.
They're like, we have to wait for you guys all day, we might as well enjoy, you know, spending time together. And I think that was so cool for me, seeing your mom at Mutt. I'd met her. Where did I quickly? I think actually we were doing some sort of handover of gear, as one does. You know, can I borrow this? Do you have that? And I'd met her super quickly, and so good seeing her again at Mutt, and just like she's your number one fan and cheerleader, and like
she's epic.
Yeah, and then how many people knew her? I was like, cool. Like you can see she's done this. She's been here.
She's an extrovert.
Yeah,
She's the opposite of me. So no, she really enjoys going to the races with me and supporting. Awesome. And I think it's like, to her, it's like the biggest social event of her life.
It's amazing. I love it. And even when I think of the trail culture and what you mentioned now about kind of being crewed for, or having the opportunity to crew for somebody else, I think when a recent example that I think we also discussed not so long ago is Dalian crewing for you at Bat Run, and before that you crewed for her at Puffer, was it?
No, I've never had the opportunity to pay it back, and now she's moved to Germany.
Oh man,
but she's crewed for me at UTCT and at Bat Run.
Okay.
So I'm quite an intuitive runner.
Yes.
So I don't have spreadsheets and things. So for UTCT, I thought, okay, I've Dalian crewing, and she needs to know kind of what my expected times at different aid stations is. So I go and have a look at all my Reiki runs, and I put together this spreadsheet of, okay, this is where I'm going to be at. This is my plan. This is my race plan. And I send it to her, and like, I promise you, like 15 minutes later, she sends it back, and she had edited the thing.
I love it.
I mean, she had like redone the whole spreadsheet, and I'm like, oh my word, this is so much better.
And you're like, not only is it her trail experience coming in, that's that engineering mind that's just like gone into overdrive. Putting the pieces together. There's going to be moving parts. There's going to be some curveballs. She's taking it all into account. That's great.
Yeah, she's already committed to UTMB.
Oh,
next year, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, I already told
Dalian, if you're listening.
Yeah, we're coming to visit, girl. Yeah, I think we've had a couple of back and forths, and she's been there, and I just love how she's exploring that community and finding kind of trail buddies on that side. And yeah, I look forward to hearing how when you do pay it back, how it goes. But just so cool again that people can kind of serve each other without expecting it necessarily to be paid back straight away.
Exactly.
It's so awesome.
And even the way people volunteer at races.
Yeah, that is another cool thing, getting a glimpse into that world. I think, having been on both sides, I think knowing what it takes to put on kind of the world-class events that we see.
Put on a race.
Yeah.
Yes, it's hard work.
Big. It's hard work.
Shout out to all the race organizers.
Yeah, we've mentioned a couple of them here, and I think, show notes are great. It's a great place for you guys to go find some more info about pretty much everything we've discussed. It'll all be there. And last little question, Tarrin, before we round off, is what is your favorite trail and why?
Oh, Em, you can't ask me that. I think some people would say it's like when a mom talks about her kids, you can't pick a favorite. I really love Panorama Trail up here in Stellenbosch.
Awesome.
It's remote, but it's still a really nice runnable trail. And I love the Drakensberg.
Yes,
anywhere in the Drakensberg, any of those lone passes or ravines.
Beautiful.
Still one of my favorite places in the country. Definitely.
Epic. I'm so glad to hear both of those are South African trails. I'm like, nice.
Definitely.
Maybe after your lap around Mont Blanc next year, you're gonna change your mind. We'll have to see. I think I'm gonna edit this in a bit later. But did we discuss what's next for you, Tarrin? What's coming up next?
Next up is Grand Raid Reunion.
Yes, cool.
That's in October. It's been one of my bucket list races for a very long time. I am so excited. Yes, it's going to be a monster. It's 106 Ks with 6,400 meters of elevation.
Wow.
And I had a look at some of the top 10 ladies' time, and it's going to be... I think we are preparing for a 20-hour race here. Running
brave is going to come into
I think we're going to have a little bit of altitude. I think we're going to have technical trails, and the humidity is definitely going to play a role. But it's my kind of race.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes.
And an adventure, something new. Have you been?
I've not been to your reunion, and that's one of the reasons I want to go, because I hear the trails are amazing.
Oh, epic.
Yes. And it's so close.
Yeah, that is close. That's so cool.
It's like a 4-hour flight from Joburg.
That's crazy. Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard incredible things of friends who have raced there, who've just visited, who've who found themselves hiking by mistake there and then being like, whoa, this is so crazy. You know, I think when people think island, you're like, how much elevation can there be on an island? And I think Reunion's like, I'll show you.
I think you climb from sea level to the top of Drakensberg, like in a matter of like 40 or 50 Ks or even less.
What? That is going to be
literally
epic.
like a mountain planted on an island.
It's like, here's a little playground for anyone who's keen to come visit and run around the mountains.
Exactly.
Tarrin, that's so cool. I'm excited to dot watch you there in October, and just seeing what's up next for you. And I mean, before UTMB next year, you'll definitely be back here to tell us how it's going and share kind of where you're at leading up to that big lap around the mountains in Europe. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. The time flew. It's been so nice to chat. And where can we find you, Tarrin? Instagram, websites?
Yeah, really, I don't have time. I have time only for one social media platform, and that's Instagram.
Nice.
You can find me at tarrin.vn.
Awesome.
And our website is vertendirt.co.za.
Love it.
That's our coaching website. And then I work at Christoph Smit, physiotherapists in Stellenbosch.
So amazing. Cool. All of that info is going to be in the show notes. Yeah, Tarrin, thanks again for joining us.
Oh, Emily, it's been lovely. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.